Today I'm going to show you how to make this cute stand-up makeup pouch. It's a very quick project and beginner friendly, and you'll also learn how to sew a zipper if you don't already know how to do that. First, you're going to cut 2 pieces of your outer fabric that are 9 inches long by 10.5 inches wide. So you'll have 2 of those, and then you'll also cut 2 of the lining fabric that will be the same measurements. This is the batting that I'm using for my project, and you're just going to cut 2 pieces of the quilt batting, and this is going to be what you use to quilt your outer fabric. And I'm just going to put my outer fabric pieces down on this, and then I just cut around it about 1 inch out from all of the sides. In total, you'll have 2 lining pieces, 2 outer pieces, 2 quilt batting pieces, and then a zipper as well. Before I quilt my fabric, I like to use basting spray. I just find that this is the easiest way to adhere your fabric to your quilt batting, and it makes quilting a lot easier. And then also what I do to make my lines for quilting is I use just a ruler and a hair marker. It basically just makes indentations in the fabric, and then you can just follow that guideline of the indentation that you make. Once you've basted your fabric to the quilt batting and then either used a hair marker or tailor's chalk or whatever it is to make your quilting lines, I'm just going to go ahead and quilt both of my outer fabric pieces. Once you've quilted both of your outer pieces, if you have a tag to add to your bag, my goodness, this would be the time to add it. I just cut mine off here, and then I just sew it on right onto one of my outer fabric pieces. Once that's done, I just go around and cut all of the excess quilt batting from the edges of my outer pieces. Next, you're going to lay one of your outer pieces facing right side up, and then take your zipper and place it right side down on top of your outer piece, and then take a lining piece and face that right side down onto the zipper, or on top of the zipper. So you'll basically have a little sandwich of your outer fabric on the bottom, and then the zipper, and then the lining. And I just switch my foot to the zipper foot, and then you'll just sew straight across the top there, making sure that you backstitch at the beginning and end. Once that's done, I like to flip my pieces to face the right way, and I like to iron it flat. And then you're basically just going to do the same steps where you're going to do the right side of the outer fabric facing up, and then the zipper facing down on top of that, and then a lining piece facing down on top of the zipper, and just do the same thing where you sew a straight stitch right across that top edge. After that, I open up my bag pieces, and I just like to iron them flat so that everything is really smooth and crisp. And then once you do that, you'll switch back to your regular foot from the zipper foot, and you'll just top stitch right across the top edge of the outer fabric. This is me just top stitching that outer fabric piece. I just wanted to include a video because I feel like sometimes that can be helpful to see what someone's doing in a tutorial. So this is me top stitching, and just want to make sure that you backstitch at the beginning and end. And this is just what it looks like after you've top stitched on both sides. Next, you're going to open your zipper about halfway or a little more, and then you're going to place your outer pieces right sides together, and then do the same thing with the lining. You'll face those right sides together, and you'll just pin around all of the edges, and then you'll leave an opening about 4 inches wide. And I like to start at this red clip and then sew all the way around the edges, and then you'll stop at the other red clip to remind you to not sew there and keep that lining piece open. So I'm just starting to sew from that first red clip, making sure that I backstitch here. And then a little tip is when you get to these corners, you can leave your needle in the fabric like this and lift your presser foot and then twist the fabric and then put it back down and keep sewing. It just makes it a lot easier to get those crisp corners. Then just remember when you're coming up on that other red clip to backstitch at the end here and to leave that opening. Once you've sewn around the edges, I just like to trim the excess. So the little tails of the zippers, I just like to cut those off, and then I also like to trim the corners at an angle. This just reduces the bulk of the bag in the end. Just make sure when you're doing this that you don't cut any of your threads that you just sewed. The next step is to box out all of your corners and then sew across them. I'm trying to demonstrate here. I feel like it's kind of hard to explain, but you just get the corners flat like that. You're just going to sew right across. This is kind of a better angle of it or a better view of it. So you're just going to sew right across those squared off corners, and that's what gives it that boxy shape, and you're going to do this to all 4 corners. So I usually just get it secured under my machine and then take the pin out, and then once again just sew right across that corner, making sure that you backstitch at the beginning and end just to make sure everything is secured in place. This is what it should look like once it's sewn, and then after I sew the corners, I like to go in with pinking shears and just trim the excess. Just again, make sure you don't trim any of the threads that you just sewed. Now we're almost completely done with the bag. The next thing is to just find that opening that we left in the lining, and then reach your hand in there and flip the bag to the right side through that hole that we left. And once you flip the bag to the right side, you can use your hands or a tool of some sort to poke out all of the corners. The very last step of making this bag is to just pull that lining piece out and find where that opening is, and we're just going to fold the lining pieces in on themselves, and I like to iron them flat and then clip them in place just so that everything is nice and smooth. And then you're just going to sew a straight stitch across that opening and make sure that you backstitch at the beginning and end. Once you've done that, this is what it should look like, and you can just stick your lining back inside of the bag, and now your stand-up makeup bag is complete. So this is what it looks like all done. I think it's such a pretty bag. I love how it looks, and I think this is a really great beginner-friendly sewing project. Thank you for watching this tutorial, and if you want to see more, please let me know and comment what sewing tutorials you want to see, because I really do enjoy making these videos. So let me know, and thank you for watching.